Well, hey there, and welcome to another alignment break. I'm Nova Whiteman, and it has been a while since I've done one of these alignment breaks. As always, these videos are meant to be short and to the point and easily digestible and easily applicable in the way of consciousness and alignment. My aim and passion is to help you close that gap between your spiritual conscious self and your everyday human self and merge those two in a practical way, a functional way, so that you can experience more of that ease and joy and flow and abundance and harmony and love and all that good stuff that we all seek and crave. For today's video, I actually want to talk about one of the most important parts of that, especially when it comes to navigating your humanness, your human self. One of the most important pieces of living your life from a standpoint of alignment that is very conscious, intentional, aware, especially aware of your own energy and its impact, the impact of your thoughts and emotions, is on something that I refer to as recovery. And what I mean by that word is, we're all experiencing points and moments of being in a higher state of alignment each and every day, whether we're doing that intentionally or not. You might describe this as being in a good mood or having a lot of energy or motivation or focus or drive or any of that stuff. And then we inevitably fall out of alignment, even when we're consciously practicing alignment, right? That's because we're human and we live in a world of contrast and we can't control all of the factors that we come across, all of the influences that we come across in our day-to-day lives. So the way that I put it is, on any given day, you're going to be in a state of alignment. You're going to inevitably fall out. And so the key is, or one really important skill to have, is to know how to recover to that higher state, that higher vantage point, that come back to that place of calm, of intentionality, of being a little bit more relaxed and aware and tuned in, tapped in, turned on, feel good, right? Accessing our higher self, if you will. So recovery is an important part of the process, and there are things that you can do. And I mean, I could write a whole book on this subject alone, but what I want to share with you today are just two aspects of that. So I think of it in terms of when putting your focus on recovering to a higher state, when you notice yourself, that's always going to be step one, noticing, observing your emotional or energetic state. You're in a bad mood, you're tired, just noticing it is first and foremost really important, because then it puts you in a position of choice of what to do from there, where to go from there. And that's where recovery comes in. The goal, the aim is always to return to that higher vantage point of alignment. However, the two aspects of recovery that I think are really important to pay attention to are, one, if you can recover, if you can pivot right away, then that's always your go-to move. Try to pivot right away. And pivoting is just, okay, I'm focused on this thing that is amplifying and emphasizing this undesirable state of being. I'm crabby, I'm tired, I'm annoyed, I'm angry, I'm overwhelmed, whatever it might be. I'm going to try to pivot by focusing on something that feels better. And that can look like anything. It doesn't have to always be something that is directly spiritual, if you will. You don't have to meditate. You can meditate. That is a great way to pivot. But sometimes we're just really in the human experience, meaning like you're too crabby to meditate. So don't do that. Reach for something that's accessible, that's within reach. So that might be go outside. Take a quick walk, take some deep breaths. It could be napping. It could be taking a coffee break. It could be venting to a friend with the intention to move on and up from there. There's a million things you can do. And like I said, it should always be your first attempt, your first choice, right? Because if you can pivot, if it's in your highest interest to pivot, you will. You'll be able to do it if you set out to do it. And B, if you can't, it's going to give you that clarity and that information that leads me to point number two, that sometimes it is not in our highest interest to recover right away or to focus on recovering to a higher state right away. Sometimes something happens that gosh, we just can't move on from. We have to sit in a little while longer, sometimes longer than others. And rather than getting frustrated with yourself over that, or frustrated with the circumstance or other people, or any of that stuff, I invite you to look at it as, okay, there's something for me, for you to pay attention to inherent in this situation. And that's why I can't recover yet. That's why my attempts to pivot, to raise my vibration, to shift my focus and awareness to something that feels better are not working, because there's a message here for me. So, do you see the distinction, the difference in that, where that's different from any reason that could fall under the umbrella of, you're just not trying hard enough, or it's something that's within your control, your ability to impact the situation. I often say, and I'm always quoting from Conversations with God on this one, that we are the conscious creators of our experience. How we experience something, that is entirely up to us. We are not the sole creators of the events, the circumstances, the happenings, the occurrences that happen in our everyday life. Those are co-created events. And more often than not, they are unconsciously co-created. So that's why we might just say, oh, it is what it is. This just happened. Like there's a divine and intelligent design to everything, but we're not always consciously in on it, right? And it's not always within just our individual control. So that's what I mean. On this conscious journey, it can be really, I mean, maybe if you're like me at all, it can be really tempting to get into this swirling mindset of like kind of getting down on yourself for not being able to consciously create your way to a better state. So consider this. Sometimes you're not supposed to. Sometimes you're supposed to sit in it. I'll give you an example of why that is, or how that works, why that might be the case. The other day, I was just in a big period of frustration with the parenting context. You'll always hear me say that's my biggest context to master some of these skills. And it was really dumb. In retrospect, I look at it and I'm like, God, why was I so annoyed with this? But essentially, it was one of my kids had poor planning while trying to plan a hangout. I was going to say play date, but she's too old for that now. A hangout session with one of her friends. And long story short, it interfered with my workflow. It disrupted my day. And that tends to be the case. We're at the tail end of summer here as I'm recording this. And so I was at my wit's end, like, okay, let's just get them back to school. We want structure. We need those hard edges. We need a little bit more predictability here. And I need more space. And being the parent that works from home primarily, that's how it ends up happening. My flow gets interrupted, and I had just, like, I was not able to pivot from it. We handled it, it worked out. Again, it wasn't that big of a deal, but inside I was fuming. Inside I was just like annoyed as all get out, and I couldn't let it go. And that's actually unlike me. That's not the norm for me because I practice this stuff 24/7 and teach it. So it's really hard for me to avoid applying it to my everyday life, even in these seemingly insignificant scenarios. Um, but I was really stuck on it. And then I got to thinking, it dawned on me like, oh, I can't pivot because there's something I need to pay attention to inherent in this situation. You see, it wasn't about the specific context. It was about what it was pointing out to me, pointing me to, rather, that I needed to look at so that I could change it, so that I could begin to make an adjustment that would help me create a new story around it, a new experience around this aspect of, we'll call, running a business while being a mom. And that situation unfolded the way it did, I believe, in retrospect, in the moment I couldn't access this. I believe that it unfolded that way, and it got me so, pissed off and annoyed because I needed to see what was no longer working. I needed to see something inherent, not to the specifics of the situation, but the broader scope of it. In other words, who am I? Who do I want to be? How do I want to experience this thing called I run a full-time business that I deeply care about and I want to do while raising two children with my husband, who's amazing and is not like your typical or stereotypical male father figure in a dynamic here. We're both, pretty equal partners. And yet we still run into this sort of thing all the time, and the brunt of it tends to fall on my shoulders. And so it pointed me to what I needed to sit in that energy for a while for was this recognition of, good God, this story, this cultural story of motherhood and the working mom. I've been privileged within this story. I'm very aware of how good I have it, and I am very appreciative of it. And I try to do my best to kind of change that narrative for the collective, if you will, in as small of a way as I can, or as big of a way as I can. But yet there was something inherent in there that I need to look at, not only to shift the dynamics in my own home and my business, but it goes bigger than that to try to shift it as a collective. And this whole framework of, I'm not going to get into it here because these videos are meant to be shorter, but if you're a mom, if you're a female, then you know what I'm talking about. We've been sort of conditioned to view our lives and how we can live and how we can work and how we can parent through a lens that is quite different from what males do. And that's probably true for a lot of men out there too. I don't want to disclude you in that generalization, but let's agree it's largely a female thing. So I had to sit in it so that I could identify it, so that I could then make a choice about it. Well, okay, this is what's in front of me here. I am not a victim. I am not powerless here. I'm at choice. But if I'm not pausing to pay attention to that and identify it and use it for the purpose in which it's intended for, I'm not going to see a change in my experience. In other words, it's likely I'm going to have more of these frustrating moments, even with school coming back into session. So instead, I get to be at choice. I get to be the conscious co-creator. I get to be the conscious soul creator of my experience by what I decide to do next. And I won't bore you with those details, but I assure you it will change. Because once I identify something that's not working, I'm all over it. That is a symptom of alignment. If you're familiar with that, I wrote a little section about that in my book, Awake and Aligned. I listed these are the things that you will experience when you're practicing alignment. And that's one of them, is you have a lower tolerance for things that do not work and a higher motivation to shift them as quickly as possible. But this is a great illustration or example of how doing so does not mean spiritually bypassing anything. It doesn't mean stepping over the human part. Do you see what we did here? I embraced it. I leaned into it. I allowed myself to be annoyed. I allowed my 12-year-old to be slightly afraid of me for an hour or so. Not in any real way, but in a way that's beyond what she's used to and what I'm used to, so that I could identify and uncover this hidden gem. So to bottom line it, if you're in a lower vibrating state, if you're out of alignment and you're conscious and aware enough to know that your only job at that point is to get back into alignment, back to that higher vantage point, step one, try and pivot. And if you, in one of the ways that we talked about already, and I'm sure I've done a video about already, and if you can, great, go from there. If you can't, look deeper. There's a message for you there. There's information that your soul is wanting to convey to you by not allowing you to shift out of it. Embrace your human and find the spiritual gem. So I hope that helps you. There's more to it than that, and I go much deeper in that in my book, Awake and Aligned, How to Navigate the Human Experience as a Spiritual Being. Very heavy on the human stuff, right? Because that's where we need a lot of help. You can get it on Amazon. It's also available on audio. And if you want more alignment tips, check out the other alignment break videos and other videos on this YouTube channel, and share it with people who are on a similar path as you and are open to this sort of thing, because that's how we raise the vibration of the collective and continue to close that gap between our human selves and our spirit selves, which we need. All right. Have a great day, guys. Thanks for tuning in.